What's going on, guys? Welcome to Rhythm and Strumming number 1. This is actually going to be a new series on rhythm guitar playing, which is, of course, is our main thing that we do on guitar. We play rhythm guitar, which means we play chords behind a singer, vocalist, instrumentalist, etc. So I want to go through some basic strum patterns today, and then over time get more involved with even more complex strum patterns. But we got to start somewhere. So this would be a good place to start and get into some basic rhythm, starting with whole notes and really going down the line in terms of succession of different rhythmic elements. Okay, so let me get you into the score right off the bat. We're going to start right on there, start right up with our score, and I'll go through it as I usually do, and you can see what's up. Here it is. Okay, so we got our chords on top. I'm going to expand this out a little bit more so you can see. All right, so we got our C add 9 and G chords, okay? So to refresh those chords, there's just gonna be 2 throughout the entire lesson today, so I don't wanna go too in depth, but C, E, G is the spelling of the C chord. The add 9 part that we see after the C is the D note. That's one note past the octave, which is C, which would be at first fret on your B string. So D is the 9 in the C add 9. We're adding a 9th into the chord. And it's the triad, C, E, G is the triad. Adding a 9th adds in a note past the octave. So, and then of course G is in there too, so we have a doubling of our G note. And what's nice about the C add 9 moving to the G chord is the ring finger pinky doesn't move at all, it just stays right in place. You're just moving your index finger and your middle finger from strings. In this case, if you go back to the C chord, you're moving 2 finger back to the 5 string, you're moving the 1 finger back to the 4 string, but of course now in the G chord, you're staying put on the bottom 2 strings, okay? So that's the deal with the chord changes. G, B, D is the spelling of your chord. And of course you can see how many G's and D's and B's we have. All right, so that's the spelling of your G chord. All right, so, and of course now we have our stacks of notes. I'm gonna get back to the beginning here. The example, when I play through it, we'll have a 4 count, and then we have the first 2 bars repeated, and that type of idea goes throughout the score. It's a 2-bar phrase throughout, okay? So you can see the rhythms are getting more filled in. We have the whole notes, which occupy the whole measure, and you'll hear the actual sustaining chord, which is the signature of a whole note. It occupies the whole measure. It gets all 4 counts, which is signified by our 4/4 time signature, 4 beats in a measure. The quarter note gets each count, okay? So the whole note occupies all 4 counts, therefore you have a sustained chord. And then we slice that in half by going to half notes. So we split the whole note in half. So 2 plus 2, in this case, is the 4. So you got your half note rhythm. Again, a sustaining rhythm is not as long as the whole note, so you're just cutting the time down by half. And we get it again. We have the half note being cut down in 2 with quarter notes. So you get 2 quarter notes per every 1 half note. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes. Again, the key signature, that's where it comes from. 4 quarter notes per measure, and there they are. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. All down strum, so the strumming is very basic. It's all down strums. The right hand moves from your bottom E string towards the floor, and that's going to be your down strum. And that's indicated by these little, like little tables, staples, whatever you want to envision that symbol meaning. That's just a notation for a down strum, okay? So C is moving to G, again, 1 measure per chord. Now we have 8th notes, which is getting more into the complex rhythms, so to speak, if you're just starting out. Constant motion on the right hand, going down and up, and that just repeats through the remainder of the measure. The counting for this is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's your count for the 8th notes. Chord notes are just 1, 2, 3, 4, going back to the half note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whole note. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're going to hear that in a second when I play through the score, okay? Now moving on to some other rhythms. 8th note triplets. This is basically 8th notes grouped in 3s. That's why you have your 3 on top, okay? You have your bracket there for 3 counts per beat, or there's 3 parts to the beat. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio, and they're grouped that way. So you have beat 1 right here, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. And the way this is counted out, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Repeats in the next measure the same way. So you can see now it's getting a little more filled in. The beats are starting to fill in a bit more. We got more activity per beat. And even more, we get to this measure. 16th notes. We have 4 16th notes per beat. Okay, so we're taking the chord note, we're slicing it into 4 parts. So we have 4 parts to each beat moving through the measure. So that's counted as 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a down, up, 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 down, up. Okay, that's how that's going to end out. So these rhythms, 16th notes in particular and 8th notes, are pretty common. There's different groupings to these rhythms, but we want to start out with a foundation and then build off of it. Okay, so this is why this is the first installment of this series, Rhythms and Strum Patterns #1. There's going to be more, obviously. There's more to come. So, but the chord changes, I just want to keep it really straight and simple. You can put any chords you want in this. You could do like A minor to E minor if you know those chords. A minor to D minor. You could do more than 2 chords. I always try to keep it to pairs because 2 is easy to deal with if you're trying to work on switching back and forth. The other option you have is to stay with 1 chord throughout the whole thing. If you try to play along with this with just 1 chord, it's going to sound kind of funky. It's going to clash. So maybe you take a metronome, pop it on, let it click out. I have it set to 60. Actually, I don't know what happened to my tempo. My tempo changed for some reason. All right, I had it at 60 earlier. Okay, so we're at 60. It's a pretty, moderate tempo, not too slow, not too fast, somewhere in between. If this feels faster, you can slow the video down and do it at a tempo that feels more comfortable. Always better to start at a slower tempo anyway, and then get faster gradually, okay? So, or you can go absolutely ape and go as fast as you want. You may have some trouble creating smooth changes if you're doing this for the first time. So you have a couple ways you can go. You can gradually go through this or just jump right into the deep end and go ape. It's up to you. I try to start slow and work my way up. It just feels more progressive in terms of I feel like I'm progressing and making progress at a gradual clip rather than trying to go for gusto and run the risk of playing with tension and then injuries and that sort of thing. So let's hear the score. I'll shut up now. Here it comes. Okay, so there you go. You can hear how crazy it gets as you go towards the end. So my recommendation is stay with each section as long as you want. Repeat as many times as you want. Of course, when you play these videos back on YouTube, you can do the playback settings, which you can speed things up, slow things down. I'm sure you guys already know all this stuff, but I figured I'd tell you anyway. That's a great tool when you're playing through these videos, is to do that. And I'll probably do some shorts on this particular lesson and put them in the shorts category, like 1 measure at a time, and not 1 measure, but 2 measures, like say the first 2 bars here. I'll put that in a short so you can actually hear just these 2 bars with the repeat, and hopefully it comes out. So that's gonna be my next little thing I'm gonna put up. In fact, one thing I'll mention here too, I'm gonna get out of the screen for just 1 second. One thing I want to mention is that the community tab is a new feature on this channel. It's not a new feature, but it is for this channel. And you can find out all the things that are coming up for the channel there. So if you're kind of curious to see what's up and what's coming up for the channel, that's a great place to go to. I took a short break from doing the short postings. I've been doing a lot of shorts and putting them up. Chord quizzes, scale quizzes, there's drum stuff in there, there's bass guitar stuff in there. So I'm sure you've seen them already, but if you haven't, check out the shorts on my channel here, and there's a lot of stuff in there. I pack a lot of things in there. I was doing about 5 to 6 postings there per day, and I didn't do anything yesterday. And as I'm filming this, I kind of missed a couple of days doing these shorts postings. Okay, but the community part is going to let you know what's coming up. There's polls in there, so you can take, there's a poll there about posting more drum lessons, more bass lessons. You can actually vote on the poll there. So there's a lot of things packed in there. Long story long. Okay, but I want to mention that. So I just want to give you that heads up. If you haven't seen it, that's a great place to go to see what's coming up for the channel. All right, let's go back to the share and check that out again. All right, so you'll probably see, like I mentioned before, 2 measures and a short with just one rhythm, right? So there'll be a short on this measure and the measure after these 2 measures and so on. Okay, so that's the whole thing with this particular lesson is as you move down the page, it gets more difficult, especially in this area, the 8th note triplet, okay? So that's a really cool rhythm. I'm gonna isolate this measure right here if I can. Let's see if I can let it repeat. Okay, so the idea there, and even the 16th note measure after that, I'm going to get out of the share for a sec. There's a couple ways you can actually play around with that particular spot, okay? And that goes with just the right hand. And I've talked about this in previous lessons where you can mute your strings literally with your left hand. Nice and light, just place your fingers on top of your strings to get that kind of sound. We don't want any pitch. We don't want any kind of like, we don't want to hear any like sounds like that. We want to just mute the strings. You could tie a sock around your strings, whatever you want to do. But just a simple left hand mute will do the trick. For triplets, for the strumming part, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm just going through all 6 strings with the right hand. I'm not going specifically with the chord and playing the amount of strings that I have per chord. Ironically enough, the G chord has all 6 strings, the C add 9 has 5 strings. So there's a bit of an element in there of accuracy when you're working through these. That's why the slow tempos work really great. Now, I also do a thing called sprinting, which is just as it indicates. It's like when you sprint, when you run, you start with a walk, then you start to jog, and then you start to run, then you really go full out, and then you bring it back the other direction. The same thing can apply to the right hand to work on stuff without the metronome, because the metronome indicates like work and it's robotic and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of things you can do with the metronome, which I'll do in a future lesson, to create grooves and create some cool feel and play around with the metronome, playing on the beat, playing off the beat, and so on. So without the metronome, 2, 3, 4 for triplets or 16th notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. They both have down and up motion consistent, right? But the 8th note triplet feels weird because it's an odd number. 3 is an odd number, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So what you get on beat 1 and 2 is down, up, down, up, down, up. And then it repeats on beats 3 and 4, right? So 1 and 2 has 1, 2, 1 and 2, and so that particular part, every 2 beats in an 8th note triplet measure repeats, right? So beat 1 has down, up, down, right? Beat 3 has the same thing, down, up, down. Beats 2 and 4, up, down, up, down, up, okay? And that's a strum pattern in itself right there. You can go 1 and 2 and 3 and that's actually more of a 16th note feel than it is a triplet. 1, 2. The 8th note triplet has more continuous flow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the other rhythm I played before that was 1, 2, 1 E and 2 E and, which is a variation on the last rhythm that I put in all 16th notes. Again, that's a later lesson. But the idea is you can kind of play around with these rhythms without a metronome and then speed up, like I mentioned earlier. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. just go as fast as you want. So it's very percussive when you mute the strings. That's really the idea with the rhythm. It's percussive, right? So you can mute your strings to create that effect, or you can do it as a drill just to get the right hand nice and mobile and also playing without tension. So if you feel any kind of tension building up in your arm, stop, shake it out, get rid of it, and then come back. 16th notes, with the 16th notes, the same thing. 1 E and 2 E and 3, 4. So it's 4 parts for 1, right? 4-to-1 ratio. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and that's probably about 72 or 80, somewhere in there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's at 60 beats per minute for the example, just to start you out. Again, I might feel a little fast. If it feels fast, use the playback settings on the video and slow it down. I love that feature, by the way. It's been around for a long time. It's such a great thing to use to practice with right from a video, any video. If a song feels too quickly, just go there and make adjustments. So the 16th note grouping has 5 other groupings after it, which I'm not covering in this lesson. This is just the basic one. To get nice even motion in the right hand, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E, and now apply the chords. Now, the thing that's tricky with moving with those rhythms, the 8th note triplet and the 16th note in particular, the whole note, the half note, the chord notes, that's pretty easy to negotiate. 8th note's the same thing. When you get into the 8th notes, ironically, that kind of feeds into the 8th note triplets and the 16th notes, where the switching between the chords, meaning you have 1 measure per chord, which you can extend if you want. That's your prerogative if you want to. 2, 3, 4. Now, I usually use the and or the in the case of the triplet, and also the 16th notes to lift the chord off. So in the case of the C add 9 going to the G, when I go into the 8th note category, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, and. So I use that moment, the and of 4 for the 8th notes, to lift my fingers up and move. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do everything on the beat specifically. I use moments like that to lift, and that's not really a unique thing or a new thing. That's one thing that happens where if you play at the fast tempos, you barely notice that there's open strings between the switching of chords from measure to measure or within one measure, moving from chord to chord. So that moment there allows me to lift and replace, right? So I'm replacing the fingers 1 and 2 on the C add 9 chord, moving to the G chord. I want to try to keep these two guys moving together, okay? And that's another drill in itself of just going through where the fingers go from chord to chord, for instance, or a finger, whereas it depends on the chord. Okay, so the idea behind that is you can actually create some smooth movement, keeping everything moving as a unit. In the case of the C add 9 and G chord, this stays in place. So we're always trying to find those kinds of things when we do chord switching, which allows us to play rhythms a little bit more effectively. So again, that's a whole other separate video. Being with the rhythm, that's something you can employ. Just go through this kind of thing where left hand's by itself. Before we actually muted the strings and focused on the right hand, getting used to a rhythm to isolate it, make sure we get the motion together and it's even, it feels good. Then when it comes time for the sound, you can mute the strings with your right hand and just hang out with your left hand to find out what's happening between the C add 9 and the G chord. If you look at my hand, you'll see that it's just this moving to that for movements, right? Because these two guys are sitting right there. They're not moving at all. These two guys are moving around. Okay, that's the idea. We want to get smooth changes. And these two guys move together. They don't get added in one at a time. Then you have this kind of, shuffle happening with the fingers. We want to get things moving as a one-piece unit. Okay. In this case, it's only 2 fingers, but they're moving together. And again, with this, take your time. And this might feel very easy for everybody else, but it's something nice to think of when you're going into other chords. How did you get those other chords smooth and you're able to move in a smooth fashion? Isolating the left hand for the movement of the fingers. Isolating the right hand for the strumming. So there's a lot of good that happens from that. And the goal is to get everything together in one sitting. Okay, whether it's one rhythm or the entire lesson here. switching between the chords. The idea is to nail it down in one lesson. And again, this could be a macro thing where you get the entire thing, or you bring it to a microcosm of information, getting that down in one sitting. That's the goal with all this stuff. Okay. And of course, to improve your fluency with rhythm. Okay. So that's the idea behind it. So I want to kind of just get away from that particular score and just go into some practice techniques at the end here. Okay. So that's the idea with these chords. Take your time. There's no rush with any of this stuff. Play without the metronome, play with the metronome. And then, you know, it's a lot of back and forth with that. We don't want to become too mechanical in the playing, but we need a reference to get the rhythms together. That's why the metronome is so important, you know, but you also want to make sure you don't overdo that element. You want to be able to have natural feel too. And then you check yourself to make sure you're not speeding up and slowing down erratically. Push and pull, as we call it, is very normal. It sounds very human, which is great. So to make sure we're not going too off track with that, the metronome kind of helps reel us in and get us into a more of a, you know, a finite time sense. Okay. So that's the deal with that. Let me just go back to the score. I'll play it through again so you get one more crack at it, so to speak. And here it is. So let's hear the whole thing. In fact, on this pass, I might even just slow it down even further. Okay, let's actually change the tempo one more time if I can do that. Let's go back up to our tempo. Nope, it's not working. All right, here we go. Let's go to, how about 50? How about that? Okay, so that we don't have to slow the video down. All right, so here it is again, the entire thing, and here it comes. Go. All right. So there you have it. That's your first part of the rhythms and strumming series, the very first one. So take all those considerations into account. You don't have to go right into the score right away. You might want to move ahead through the video till you get to the left hand, right hand isolation bits and hang with that for a little bit. But I always like to jump right into the score so you can see what's up, and then of course discuss all the different elements and what you can do with them to achieve the goal of nailing down something in one sitting. Okay. So that's the deal. And if you like the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And also the other videos will appear somewhere up here, down here. I'm not sure where they're going to show up, but any moment they'll show up. And again, don't forget to watch the community tab to see what's happening, what's coming up. If there's any kind of change in the course of action, you'll get to see all that. All right. All right, guys, have a good one. I'll talk to you again real soon. See you in the next video. Bye.